and Media Rights by Ashley Zamora. Legislation, Governance, and Compliance in Collegiate Athletics for Dr. Lund. With our index, we have introduction, NCAA sports and governance, comparing funds between Division II and Division I scholarship athletes and how media money can help fill gaps, amateurism laws, NCAA and media earnings, football and the amount of revenue it earns alone, all other sports and the amount they earn aside football, dividing football and all other sports media earnings throughout all sports programs, media revenue and new game training and practice facilities, NCAA media rights history, and our references. Start here with our introduction. The NCAA has been blessed with astonishing, dedicated, and devoted athletes, but sadly, a large amount of these athletes are suffering financially. A large amount of these suffering athletes are either on athletic or academic scholarships and still finding it difficult to make ends meet. I can only imagine the walk-on athletes and how much harder it is for those students financially. It is not unheard that a full-time athlete will have a full or part-time job, 15 hours of classes, plus training 20 hours a week for their sport. The NCAA depends greatly on the amount of revenue they are obtaining through their programs. According to the NCAA, in 2011-2012, the NCAA gained 81% of their revenues from television and marketing fees, 11% from championships, 4% from these investments, 2% from college football arbiter officials, 1% from sales and services, and the last 1% from facilities. NCAA sports governance. NCAA believes and wants athletic directors to have a stronger voice in decision making. They want to have a louder voice with handling amateurism, rules, money, and academic integrity. There would have to be appointed groups to examine every issue, along with stressing the focus on the way in which Division I is organized for the purpose of decision making. Controlling all these aspects of the organization can become a very complex task. Governance in NCAA sports is becoming more and more prominent throughout the entire organization. Governance in sports can be extremely beneficial and at the same time could be very overwhelming. This slide still governance in sports. Control over organization is also very important, but in my opinion, too much control puts limits on the success of certain programs. This is unknown for the NCAA, and giving athletes money for media revenues would violate amateurism laws. The NCAA would have to completely revise amateurism laws. This could be very extensive, and the NCAA can lose some control over what the athletes are earning within the program and outside the program. NCAA is an extremely organized organization and has been known for the organization they present throughout all division schools. Media comparisons in Division I and Division II scholarship athletes. Moving forward from the NCAA governance control, there was a quite difference between Division I and Division II schools. I believe that the level of division should be considered, especially when giving scholarship athletes more funds from the media. Let's take Texas A&M University Kingsville and compare it to A&M University College Station. We have Division I, Texas A&M College Station. The cost of living there is about $21,581 for 15 hours of school. For Division II, Texas A&M Kingsville, cost of living is on average about $15,222 for also 15 hours of school. The difference here is that the division of their sport programs and schools. The cost of attendance is absolutely higher at TAMU, but does not mean the amount of scholarship money is raised from one school to the next. In some cases, I would believe so, but in most athletes' cases, the same amounts would apply. So far as receiving books, dorms, and food money, I am sure the scholarship money helps some for these athletes, but surely the scholarship money does not cover the full cost of the semester. Amateurism laws. Amateurism is by far the most talked about legal case when it comes to the NCAA. The NCAA has found many ways in controlling athletes. Amateurism is one of the biggest concerns in the NCAA because if athletes were able to sell their own pictures and autographs, then the NCAA will lose so much money. Other major rules the NCAA has set in place are rules of requirements and gifting from booster clubs. NCAA's goal is to keep a consistency between all divisions and the amount of monies student athletes can receive at each individual program. Let's take a look at Johnny Manziel of Texas A&M University Aggies. Manziel is just about the worst person on the planet to fight the NCAA on amateurism, says Rosenberg from Sports Illustrated. Johnny Manziel sold his autograph for $5,000 in 2012. What Manziel failed to remember was that he belonged to the NCAA. His name, his picture, his autograph, his talent. For this, he had broken the NCAA's highest legal case, which is amateurism. NCAA and media earnings. The NCAA is always trying to find more ways to make more money, but are not trying to accommodate the financial needs of their athletes. NCAA has come upon a very arguable point with media and the revenue they are obtaining for the media game and event coverage. This is the one legal issue that the NCAA has been facing. If these athletes are contributing millions of dollars of funds for these universities through media revenues, then why are they not able to receive extra funds for their accomplishments and talents? NCAA can earn up to $1.71 billion just off media revenues and are not upgrading scholarships or funds for athletes. Student athletes at all divisions are suffering financially every day. If media money was split among every scholarship athlete in the 5-power conference, each scholarship athlete would receive an additional $16,066 a year in 2020. But the money hasn't trickled into the pockets of these athletes. It has gone into locker rooms, weight rooms, and facilities of these schools. Football revenue. D1 big football schools. We all know that football is the ultimate source of revenue for the NCAA college sports. We have the SEC with Alabama, South Carolina, and Mississippi. We have the ACC with Florida State, NC State, Wake Forest, and Notre Dame. We have the Big Ten with Ohio State, Michigan State, and Northwestern. We have the Big 12 with Texas, Kansas, and Texas Tech. And we have Pac-12 with Stanford, California, and Washington State. These huge division schools make for an outstanding amount of television revenues. For example, in 2008, Alabama's football collects a total revenue of $124 million. Texas football collects $120 million. Ohio State football collects $116 million. And Florida State collects $107 million. The top 4 schools alone for football collect $467 million in total media revenue. Imagine if these schools would have the right to gain some of it, some if not most of the television media rights. There would be an unimaginable amount of money. Sadly, all this money does not go to scholarship athletes. If football alone could gain media rights over all games, tournaments, and bowls, the amount of athletes financially suffering would decrease. There would have been many battles over the media rights and the NCAA. If the NCAA could gain a higher percentage of the revenue, then they could compensate these athletes that are in need, or the athletes that deserve to be compensated, like Johnny Manziel, for example. Moving on, the football to all their sports and media rights. All other sports and revenue. According to Sports Business Daily, the total revenue gained by all sports at Alabama, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida State, NC State, Wake Forest, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan State, Northwestern, Texas, Kansas, Texas Tech, Stanford, California, and Washington State in 2008 was $943 million. In 2015, they are predicted to rise 81.4% and be around $1.711 billion. In 2020, revenue is predicted to rise 148% and be at around $2.343 billion. If we could have 25% of the revenue go to scholarship athletes, then each athlete in the SEC, ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, Pac-12 would receive an extra $16,066 each year they remained in school and on athletic scholarship. Dividing football revenues to all sports. Now we know the majority of the earnings are coming from Division I football. The question is it fair to share all football earnings with other sports? Let's take Alabama football. They collect a total revenue of $124 million. And this is not including the total possible if Alabama claimed their rights to all the monies earned in the media. If Alabama football decided to only use the amount of money with only Alabama football players and all their facilities, then every single eligible football player would strive to go to Alabama. This would not only be unfair to all other Division I universities, but would also be unfair to all other sports. I guess this is why there are amateurism laws in place, to prevent an overload of athletes at one school and not others, simply because the amount of funds one school can offer. We know that Alabama makes more money off of football than, let's say, California. Does this mean that all athletes should get compensated more simply because they are attending Alabama? I don't agree with that. There would be no point in compensating for national titles if all the star athletes. There would be no point in competing for national titles if all-star athletes were at one school. Besides, all the earnings from one football program going to compensate those athletes. Let's say that Alabama signed a contract with all media stating that they received at least 25% of all media earnings, and the money would be distributed to all athletes on scholarship at each Division I school. This would not only be fair, but be equally divided amongst all athletes. After all, the tuition at one school does not vary from person to person. This would decrease the amount of outside stress the athletes would experience and would increase the quality of work in the classroom and on the field. This brings me to my next topic. Aside the NCAA gaining 25% of the media revenue for athletes that are on scholarships, they would gain another 50% for stadiums, training and practice facilities, and other maintenance costs. Media revenue, new game practice and training facilities. The stadiums with the highest public costs in 2010 tend to be built for football and baseball and at about $480 million each, in part because Those are more expensive buildings than basketball or hockey arenas or other sports, which cost about $170 million. Knowing that football and baseball stadiums and facilities are at the top of the financial charts when it comes to building new facilities, it only makes sense that those two sports would bring in the most overall revenue. Football making an amazing amount of money, and if football would have rights over the revenue they would bring in for the media, then universities and the NCAA would have no issues building and maintaining new facilities, fitness facilities, stadiums, and practice facilities for all schools. The real issue is spreading the money that's earned from football amongst all other sports. One can say that it is unfair for football's earned funds to be distributed amongst all other sports at the universities, but in my opinion, it has to be that way. Softball or volleyball alone will not make enough money to maintain, rebuild, or support their facility needs. One can say that this is unfair simply because the revenue earned from these two sports is not used to support football's needs. In the end, softball just does not make enough money to support the thousands of fans and 100 to 150 football athletes. Media rights and media history. The NCAA has been involved with the media rights since 1982. Since this time, the amount of money being earned from the media revenue has increased from $50 million to $10 million. Still, the NCAA is not at the peak of its earnings. Even without the NCAA being at their highest earnings, they can still afford to give scholarship athletes more money. From the media earnings and having enough for all other costs. Below is a list of all media right agreements since 1982 and the media and percent revenue overall revenue from 2006 to 2013. Here on the right we have our media revenue breakdown. We have 81% coming from television, marketing, and rights fees. We have championship games, investments, eligibility center, college football, arbiter officials, sales and services, and facilities and other. History of the NCAA media rights agreement on the left. We have 1982, with CBS, a 3-year agreement for $49.9 million. And we have 1985, CBS, also another 3-year agreement for $94.7 million. 1988, $166 million. 1991, $1 billion. 1995, $1.75 billion. 2002, an 11-year agreement for $6 billion. 2002 again with ESPN, 11-year agreement for $200 million. 2010 with CBS and Turner, 14-year agreement for $10.8 billion. Here on the right we have your media percent revenue and overall revenue from 2006 to 2007. We have $509 million to $621.8 million. And 2007, 2008, 549 to 636. 2008, 2009, 594 to 701.9 million. 2009, 2010, we have 642 to 749 million. 2010, 2011, we have 687 million to 845 million. In 2012-13, we have 705 million to 871 million.